Out of all the Halo games, the one almost everyone would always hype up the most was Halo 3, and for very good reason.
Alright, Master Chief is coming. I've never said this in my entire life. I probably never will again. Alright, there it is. People are screaming out here. I think there's even more happening now.
If you were a gamer back on the 25th of September 2007, you understood the overwhelming excitement of lining up to pick up your copy of Halo 3.
We're standing outside the store tonight. We're going to be the first Halo fans in the world.
The advertisement team for Halo 3 at the time let loose. The Believe trailer. A trailer that showed a war-torn battlefield in the art style of figurines and claymation, Marines crying and screaming in a complete still, with frozen explosions and brutes rampaging through the makeshift trenches, and at the end of it, the camera pans and cuts. The Master Chief, held by a brute. Is he captured? Is he dead? And then we see it. A plasma grenade in his hand, and his head looks at the camera. Then this. Believe. Believe was just one of the adrenaline fuel bombs that we got thrown at us, because the starry night sky made the hairs on my arms stand up. The trailer reveals two kids lying in the grass, looking up at the sky, wondering what life might await in the stars. And then boom, we're in a dust ball battlefield, the once child Master Chief, now a soldier. We hear a Marine over the radio saying, a Wraith's mortar round, blocked by the newly revealed bubble shield equipment, and then the music kicks hard, with the Master Chief running over the battlefield towards a cliff, pulling his assault rifle off of his back, and then jumping off into a huge crowd of brutes when... Finished the Fight, 2007. Halo 3 had the attention of every single person that owned an Xbox back then. Let's also not forget the Halo Landfall trailer. A live-action sequence showing squads of ODSTs and Marines battling it out with brutes. All of this was gaming at its peak, and Halo 3 broke that peak. 10-year-old me at the time had finally, after waiting as long as I could for the weekend to appear, managed to get my hands on my Halo 3 copy. Rushing home and inserting the disc into my still brand new 360 console at the time, I was met with this. Everything I could have hoped for from watching all the trailers and playing the previous two games religiously for months building up to this was now sitting there in all of its glory, with music that would make even the newest gamers weep. My next and possibly final adventure with the Master Chief was ahead of me, to experience where we left off from Halo 2's cliffhanger ending and discover where Sergeant Johnson and the Arbiter went. Was Cortana still alive on High Charity? Was the monitor back on our side again? Was it the end of the world for Earth? I clicked the start solo game and chose the normal difficulty. Just like Starry Night, a screen of inky blackness and stars are revealed, and Cortana's monologue begins.
Choose whichever Spartan I wanted. You know me. I did my research, watched as you became the soldier we needed you to be.
She explains almost poetically that Master Chief is not like the other soldiers, that he is perhaps the saviour of the universe, and that he has luck.
But you had...
Okay, so when I was still just a little nipper running around and, I don't know, pretending that I was the Master Chief or Sonic or whatever the hell I did in my free time, this was one of the coolest ways to reveal just why the Master Chief was practically invincible. Luck. I was such an idiot. Really, luck. Not training or overpowered armour, luck. Looking back at this sentence now, it's the dumbest and most movie trope, cliche crap ever thrown at us to explain just why this super soldier is so good at what he does. And still to this day, Halo fans joke about luck as just another word for plot armour. But when you're 10 years old, that shit's pretty fucking dope. After Cortana's touching words describing the Master Chief's badassness down to look, it's revealed to us that this meteor-looking object burning through the atmosphere, on its way down to the ground, was actually the Master Chief.
Was I wrong?
We open again swiftly to a bunch of Marines huddled around a goofy-looking Master Chief. His armour locked up to survive the fall from a 2-kilometre height. The men are worried that humanity's saviour might be finally out of service, and an unsteady Sergeant Johnson huffs a cigar, blowing the stress from his mouth. The sombre music hits you with a note that maybe he actually isn't going to make it, and that this really is the end of the line for Chief. Straight away we're hit with a sense of hopelessness. Johnson removes the empty AI housing and makes the decision that if he is dead, they certainly ain't leaving the body in the middle of a jungle.
Heavy lift gear. We're not leaving him here.
And then a hand grabs his wrist.
You're not.
Oh, crazy fool.
Relief washes over, and even though there's a whole game ahead of you, it makes you feel like you might actually be gone. Already Bungie had played with my emotions in a way only they knew how to. The events of Halo 2 are relayed back, as we're reminded that of course, Cortana was left behind.
If you know you can't keep it.
She stayed behind.
And mystery once again added back into Halo's story, making us wonder if we'll ever see her again. After the relieving reunion with Sergeant Johnson, we were hit with the familiar task of highlighting the lights with our crosshairs. A common practice with all Halo games up to that point, which of course gives us the option to choose inverted or normal right stick controls. And like a normal person, we choose the non-inverted method. Johnson's sassy personality tells the corporal to leave us alone, and we're ready to get slaying. Another cutscene plays out, revealing a camouflaged elite, seemingly stalking the group when Master Chief notices, and goes for the killing blow.
The Arbiter's with us!
It's the Arbiter, the second protagonist we played in Halo 2, and now after only briefly meeting each other as enemies, the two are now allies, and what a way to start such an intense relationship.
We must go. The brutes have our scent.
And they must love the smell of green.
This is where the game finally opens up, and we get a first taste of Halo 3's fresh new in-game graphics. It's a big step up from the previous two, and with it being deployed to the new Xbox 360, the detail at the time was probably comparable to seeing Unreal Engine 5 for the first time today. Nobody in 2007 truly expected these graphics to actually be in-game, but we were all quickly surprised to just how true it was to the gameplay trailers. The green jungle was first introduced to show it all particularly well, immediately grabbing our attention to see more of what the game engine can offer. We start by moving our way through the unfortunately linear path ahead of us, seemingly set up to advertise the game's new lighting and graphics. We're also introduced to the new HUD system, with our energy shield bar now being at the top of our screen instead of above the motion tracker like Halo 2. An old familiar weapon is also returned to us, as we see that the rifle we are now holding is actually very similar to the assault rifle from the first Halo, with the major difference being a smaller magazine and a slower fire rate. It felt dumbed down slightly, but it fit in well with the rest of the weapon sandbox. As we move ahead, we now walk side by side with the Arbiter. Also, just a side note here, but a pretty substantial gameplay feature was the continued use of Halo's co-op campaign, only now instead of a clone of the Master Chief, plugging in a second controller would have your friend be in control of the Arbiter. It was a fun, lore-friendly way of keeping co-op without breaking the immersion of the campaign, and it's a detail I hadn't seen in any other co-op game do at the time. After avoiding detection from a passing phantom by hiding below the tree line, Sergeant Johnson decides that splitting the ragtag squad up would be a wiser decision than staying with 2 unstoppable killing machines, and leaves you with the Arbiter and a small number of Marines by climbing a cliff wall. A decision that we later see to fall on its face hard. Genius. As they leave, we see our first newly designed brute. Gone were the days of the bullet sponge guerrillas, as their once exposed bodies are now covered in heavy assault armour that need to be broken through before you can land any kind of killing blow. It's clear that Bungie did this to keep the familiar rhythm of the previous games. Now that the elites are on our side, the brutes replace them and take their spot as the common Covenant soldier. This to me left a slightly bitter taste in my mouth at the time. Halo 2's introduction to the brutes as a new enemy with significantly more health than elites was actually a fun challenge. Well, at least to me anyway. Although at times I do regret my opinion when I attempt to play Halo 2 again on Legendary, and don't even get me started on Lasso. It also gives us more of an understanding as to why the Prophets decided to swap between elites and brutes as the Covenant's main soldier. Not just for blindly following their leaders, unlike the increasingly suspicious elites, but also for their physical prowess. Anyway, we begin our first firefight, defeating our first group of ordinary Covenant consisting of 1 brute and 4 grunts. We also discover that by shooting the grunts' methane tanks, Halo 3's physics jumps into play. The tanks will combust, and the body of the grunt will begin to fly around the area, adding on to the already comedic relief that is the average grunt. After dealing with them, we also get our first hands-on experience with the new at the time equipment. It adds an extra layer of possibilities to the gameplay, the first of which we find is the bubble shield, protecting from projectiles once we're hidden inside. It's at this point that we actually hear the Marines and the Arbiter sometimes engage in conversation, showing off more of Keith David's smooth alien voice as well as the improvement in how AIs interact with each other. We travel through and between dark caves with some containing red flares, an attempt of Bungie really trying to show off the Blam engine's new lighting graphics at the time. Another area opens up after and we find a squad of sleeping grunts overwatched by their brute daddy, making sure his kids get a good night's sleep. Of course, we have other ideas for the fart breathers and do our best to stealthily take out as many as we can before the angry monkey notices. Meleeing in Halo 3 feels just as fun as the previous two, with the addition of the grunts' detachable methane tanks adds a layer of power behind your punches. It's also at this part that after engaging with the now aware brute, that could use the first new weapon of Halo 3's sandbox. The Brute Spiker, a small SMG-like weapon that perfectly complements the rough and vicious personality of the alien monkeys. You hear that 343? Remind me what the brutes use in Infinite again?
It's the biggest piece of dog shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I mean, it's alright, it's alright, that's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Whereas the elites in their otherworldly blue armour used plasma-based weapons, the brutes prefer the much more brutal spiker ammunition ripping through Marines rather than melting them. Its unique melee animation is also a much appreciated touch, using its tusk-like blades below the barrel as intended. Craig's sidearmed spiker was a great new addition at the time, and was an exciting new toy to use on the battlefield. I make use of the returning dual-wielding capabilities, and move on to eventually find the missing Bravo team, mentioned over comms, and see a brute holding up a Marine in one hand, interrogating him. Like the complete Chad I am, the hero in me takes over, and I do my best to save him from certain death. After a near miss with Jesus for the Marine and discovering the slaughtered squad nearby, we pick up one of the deceased's battle rifles and continue through the trees. Jumping down a small cliff, we're hit with the first of many annoying interruptions from Cortana, either transcommunicating to us telepathically or showing an old memory we aren't sure of. But it does mean that there will most likely be a conclusion to Cortana's story within the game as well. Although I wish they found a less interrupting way to deal with this at the time. Personally, I feel like it deters you slightly from any replayability and makes me wish there was a way to disable the point after completion. Once that's all over, we come across more Covenant, this time attacking pelicans nearby the riverside. Banshees come by and say, "Fuck you, this is my airspace," and blast them out of the sky. The pelicans begin to crash and we later find them after fighting through the brutes, grunts and reintroduced arseholes known as jackals. Their shields just as annoying as last time, but oddly satisfying to get around the challenge, especially when using the BR. I borrow a brute shot from a recently deceased brute and the music kicks in as we fight our way through to the crash site, with Marty O'Donnell playing us some pure Halo gold to complement the situation.
Run! Look out! There's more!
It's revealed to us over the radio after the aerial skirmish that Sergeant Johnson and his squad was in one of those pelicans, and now it's up to us to save the idiot that decided it was a good idea to split up. We make our way through the sniper-infested alley of beam rifle jackals. Whilst worrying about how hard this will be, coming back to it on Legendary while suffering from PTSD flashbacks of the Halo 2 sniper jackals. We come across a now retreating Sergeant Johnson, teasing the brutes to chase him. Likely an unwise decision, which we later find out to be an accurate assessment. So killing the Covenant in the area and recovering an abandoned sniper rifle we found at the crash site, we try to follow the Sergeant's path. We discover after irritating a brute chieftain, he manages to get himself imprisoned along with the rest of his fleeing squad. So it's up to the boys and I to pull off a rescue mission and save our favourite Marine, second only of course to Chip Stubbo.
The captain needs you on the bridge ASAP! Better follow me!
The sniper we recovered from the down Pelican comes in handy here, and we send a few rounds down range before jumping into any real danger. This really highlights Halo 3's sandbox gameplay by rewarding us with different methods of attacking Johnson's captures. Exploring off the laid out path gave us a sniper rifle that is now a massive edge for us to use against the brute chieftain and sniper jackals. It's also a must have for when coming back through the game on a higher difficulty. We blast our way through the coveys and make it to Johnson's makeshift prison, prompting us to disable the energy barrier and release him. Johnson makes another comedic remark.
We're even, long as we're only counting today.
And we're then forced to fight off more Covenant as they're dropped off by phantoms. The objective, stay alive, appears, giving a sense of a last man standing type scenario. This area is great for giving you a chance to make use of the new equipment mechanic. By deploying a bubble shield, it really helps give that sense of trying to hold our ground for as long as we can. We also use the recently unalived brute chieftain's hammer in this area, finally satisfying my hunger for Tartarus's hammer back in Halo 2. I also remembered here that unlike Halo 2, you can't dual wield with the Needler. I imagine the reason being to balance out the sandbox, mainly for multiplayer, but I don't understand why they couldn't just make it dual wield capable in the campaign. It's just a small nitpick on my behalf, but I really did miss being able to just turn everything into a pink mist. Halo's sandbox really shines in these types of scenarios, giving us multiple areas we could set up for a defensive position, and even the sniper can be used well enough in certain points if you left any ammo for yourself. After a few minutes, our evac shows up and lovingly sends a few rockets to tickle the still airbound phantoms, putting them to sleep in the flowing water below. It's a great demonstration of just how much Halo 3 has evolved from its previous games, with the new physics of now destructible phantoms that we later get to blow up ourselves. It reminds me of the time I tried so hard to blow up that Spirit dropship with a Scorpion in Assault on the Control Room in Halo CE. We jump in the Pelican and escape the jungle, finding ourselves on our way to the game's next mission, which I'm now going to pass you all on to somebody well known in the Halo community, and whose name you've already seen in the title, to make my analysis sound like a 3-year-old babbling about his favourite spaghetti hoop. Take it away, innit?
Thank you very much, Reclaimer Gaming. So, I'll pick up where you left off and we'll tackle the Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest, one of the more easily forgotten levels of Halo 3 that nonetheless sets up some very important narrative points for the coming game. The Marines' excitement of the arrival of the Chief highlights just how important Master Chief has been to the war effort and keeping morale high.
I'll bet. It's good to see you, Chief.
Wise man.
We'll politely just brush over the fact that Chief would have probably just broken every bone in Miranda's hand, but, you know. Interesting point to note here that the Marines salute their commanding officers but refuse to salute the Arbiter, obviously still holding some resentment against the elite, but we'll also notice here Thelvadam actually lingers on the injured Marine as he goes by, perhaps feeling some degree of guilt and remorse about what he had done to humanity over the course of the war.
The rings will kill us all.
Ma'am?
Chief being cheery as always. Finally, we get an interrupt by this game's main antagonist.
Big risk, but I'm confident.
Hell, not again.
Emergency generators, now!
Shielding failed. They're down and charging.
As soon as
Hi,
they're
Nathan
up,
Fillion.
establish contact with Lord Hood. Let him know.
All of you vermin, cowering in the dirt, thinking, what, I wonder, that you might escape the coming fire? No. Your world will burn until its surface is but glass, and not even your demon will live to creep, blackened from its hole to mar the reflection of our passage, the culmination of our journey. For your destruction is the will of the gods, and I am their instrument.
Truth's broadcast and mention of the Chief highlights the fact that he is fully aware that the Chief is in fact alive and well.
Give the order, we're closing shop.
This highlights then that Truth has full intention of attacking Crow's Nest, which is immediately followed by probably one of the most frustrating parts of dialogue in the entire game.
Where should they go?
Where should they go, Miranda?
To war.
To war. Where's that exactly? Do you know where that is exactly, Miranda? Miranda, do you know where that is? Is it at the top of these stairs? Oh, it's not at the top of these stairs. Is it here? No, it's not here either. Is it down at the bottom of the stairs? Do you want to go and check? See if war is down there. Has that made it any clearer for you, Miranda? Where exactly is where's war? Where are we going? It's a very indescript piece of information that you've given us. Where the hell are all the soldiers actually forming up at the moment? Have you found war yet? What was the plan, Miranda? What are we supposed to be making happen?
Don't worry about the commander. I got it.
I'm really worried about the commander, because if she's a commander and she's supposed to be leading forces, she's just given probably one of the worst orders that I've ever heard.
Perimeter's this way.
That Marine just gave us more of a descriptive information about where I'm supposed to be going. Perimeter is this way. That's informative. That's useful information. Where are we supposed to go? To war. How does that help? Anyway, moving on. Walking through the base and seeing Marines getting set up ready for the impending battle is quite a nice touch.
Hangar Sergeant. Agreed, Master Chief.
Again, you know, hangar. We're now getting information on where we're supposed to be going, you know. Miranda. Rather than just to war, Miranda. The rather indescript labyrinthine corridors of Crow's Nest highlights that it is actually a base that was built a long time ago, at least in regards to what's going on in Halo at the time, and has been reappropriated for the war effort. We then finally encounter our first enemies of the level and immediately botch throwing a grenade. Nevertheless, once clearing this long corridor, we then gain access to a further corridor which will eventually lead us to where we're supposed to be. It's worth noting this is one of the main corridors of the level that allows us to traverse to numerous different locations on this level. After clearing out one of the interconnecting hallways of just a handful of grunts and a couple of jackals, we then are pretty much on a straight shot directly to the hangar bay. An effective beatdown. Nevertheless, a short walk and we find ourselves actually in the hangar bay, which is one of the first major wave-based staging areas of the campaign. And after initially clearing out the Covenant that are holding the hangar bay at the time, this area is then subsequently assaulted by several waves of Covenant reinforcements. The primary purpose of clearing out this particular area is to allow the pelicans that are currently in holding above and to the right of this hangar bay to be able to be deployed and then be loaded up with marines evacuating Crow's Nest. A task which Chief barely accomplishes before being ushered on to another location of the level. Wait, did that marine just get startled by Chief? I'd not noticed that before. Upon walking through some more of these indistinct hallways with their interconnected chambers, we then get our first foreshadowing of the drones for Halo 3. We're given the screen prompt, get back to the Ops Center, a place that we've already been, so we know roughly the right direction to be walking, but then that's immediately updated thereafter that we then need to be going to the barracks because hostiles have begun assaulting it. But that isn't before we actually have to deal with the drones for the first time.
Coming out of the vents!
Line them up! Line them up!
What the hell are those things, Sergeant?
Drones! A whole swarm! Take them down! Short control burst!
Short control bursts my ass. Upon clearing out the last of the drones, the door at the bottom of this area opens and allows us access back through to the Ops Center. We'll conveniently brush over the fact that the guy talking about putting a timer on the bomb is the same guy that is the voice actor of Miranda's father, but awkward. So Miranda asks Johnson to put out his cigar in spite of the fact that the bomb in question won't just be ignited spontaneously by the ember from a cigar.
Johnson, you might want to put that out. Chief,
I also like the fact that there's also a little protestation from Johnson himself in having to put out his cigar.
have a look. A little going away gift.
So the plan to blow the base is revealed to us, and upon following Johnson, shotguns foreshadow a battle in close quarters, due in just a moment. Chips, good to see you. This is another intermediary kind of location, a location that we will revisit in due course, but from a different angle. It's tantamount to Halo's equivalent of liminal spaces. It's also here that we encounter our first pack of brutes on this level, being led, no less, by a chieftain. After ruining the brute's whole career in your chosen fashion, personally I like to assassinate as many of them as possible and then just completely and utterly pepper them quite nicely with the chain gun. You're then free to move on into the barracks itself, once again moving through the crow's nests, indistinct hallways, which, in spite playing hundreds of times since the game's original release, I still get lost in. Scared the shit out of me. We drop down and we are once again unceremoniously interrupted by Cortana, which in truth isn't actually Cortana, at least as far as the lore is concerned. It's technically the Gravemind torturing Chief from a distance. We once again get to see how the drones are using the air conditioning system to move throughout the base, and we can either ignore them completely or quite simply slap them in the face. We then get a first-hand look at how the Arbiter handles diplomacy. Has that worked well for you in the past, Arbiter? You know, just demanding that they rebel and side with you while simultaneously shooting them in the face. Anyway, we finally enter the barracks, which, depending on how fast you act, you can actually save at least one of the Marines in this first encounter. If you react slowly, you'll see one get tossed against the pillar and the other one being taunted by the brutes about soiling itself and then ultimately killing them. However, if you're quick enough, you can save that Marine. Finally, you get to bring the shotgun to bear and take out the brutes literally without breaking a stride as you walk through the barracks. In some difficulties, this little side room here is actually accessible and you can use it to flank the brutes that are holed up in the shower. Really random place to be holed up. In either case, you can continue to progress through the barracks and come across Marines that are effectively being held hostage In any case, upon killing their guards, the Marines will then rally to and grab weapons and help you out. How many of them actually survive to get out of the barracks is completely dependent on how you play. Arbiter gives some words of encouragement, and we move our way to the landing pad where the survivors can be extracted. This conveniently just so happens to be the same landing pad that has the Pelican that Miranda is currently inside of. Miranda?
Couldn't hold them all. Falling back to the hangar. But don't wait for us.
What should I do, ma'am?
Hold position. I'm not leaving without him.
I rescued a surprising amount of Marines this time. We finally get topside, and we get movement on the motion trackers showing jetpack brutes are about to drop in. Miranda gives the order for the Pelican to shake off the jetpack brutes, which basically just involves taking off and leaving for a while, and leaves it to our big green badass to clear the area. After everything is clear, the Pelican returns, and we also get a little glimpse of Hornets flying above outside. And then me conveniently forgetting that I'm not playing Halo Infinite and attempting to sprint, instead just throwing a ridiculously placed grav lift. In either case, we now follow some more indescript corridors through to an adjoining corridor where we have a lot of Covenants set up and ready for our arrival. We then get yet another interrupt from Cortana, or more accurately the Gravemind, referencing things that were said to the Spartans as children when they were first inducted into the UNSC. Things that in fact Dr. Halsey said to the children, but of course because Cortana is made of a cloned brain of Dr. Halsey, they kind of share some memories. This again is foreshadowing the fact that the Gravemind is actually tearing through the upper layers of Cortana's psyche and gleaning valuable information that he can use to manipulate the Master Chief. Because you have to bear in mind, if these transmissions as a whole are actually coming from the Cortana, it begs the question, how is that happening? I mean, all of Cortana is still on High Charity halfway across the galaxy, and she's locked down and has no way to send any transmissions out of High Charity in any degree of strength that's powerful enough to actually be picked up by Chief and Chief alone. Even the small fragment of her that will eventually arrive on the flood-infested cruiser on Earth is just a recording, and as such has no capability of transmitting any information from itself. But a being that does have the ability to communicate across vast distances of the galaxy on a quote-unquote telepathic level is the Gravemind. The earlier interrupt from the arrival level, where Chief's vitals ping KIA, also kind of lean into the fact that obviously the Gravemind is, so to speak, the living dead. Suddenly having his mind accessed by the Gravemind would then cause his suit to think, at least for a moment, that he had died. In either case, I'm getting waylaid on the lore here. Let's get back to the level. After taking down a Covenant staged area where they have turrets and jackals with carbines set up, we finally clear the area and realise this is the liminal space that had the first pack of brutes in it, once again highlighting the interconnectedness of Crow's Nest. It would have been a nice touch if, where the brutes' bodies had fallen and died when you went through this area earlier, they were still there. That would be really nice to highlight the fact that it's exactly the same area. But nevertheless, to the astute among us, we can put those two together relatively easily. Some fancy gunplay, and we can clear up the op center relatively quickly, although it is worth noting, particularly at higher difficulties, this chieftain can present a significant problem considering he has a fuel rod gun and an itchy trigger finger. We prime the bomb, and then comes the mad dash to the hangar bay to try to get out of Crow's Nest. I'm a little bit confused, however, in that the bomb was armed and wired to other charges throughout the base. Yet after Chief primes the primary bomb, explosions start going off across Crow's base anyway. Surely it's all supposed to fire at the same time. The fact that it doesn't, and that there's actually explosions already going off, suggests either 1. Whoever it was that wired the bomb together didn't have a clue what they were doing, or 2. Miranda was directly involved in some regard. Now, I give Miranda a hard time in this particular level just because of the nonsensical dialogue. In all likelihood, there was probably other things planned for her within this level, or other things planned for how she was going to be involved in the battle, but, you know, time constraints and resources and having to cut things from the finished game, it's entirely possible that these were just kind of leftover snippets of dialogue that ultimately didn't lead anywhere. She's not as useless as a character as I've made her out to be. Most of the time. Commander Miranda. Okay, I'll leave it now. In either case, now we have the mad dash through the base to try to get out. Now, you can choose to kill every single Covenant son of a bitch as you go through the base. Let's be honest, if the entire place is going to be caving in on itself and blowing up, why waste the ammo? Still getting lost in these goddamn corridors, and yet another interrupt from Cortana. Again, we're basically retracing our steps of the very first actions that we took in this level, going from the op center back down to the hangar bay. So it's the same course, same direction, same pretty much everything. You just this time around you've got explosions impending and you can choose to ignore the enemies. Pretty straightforward, really. These are going to get frustrating. Again, I get the narrative that they're trying to drive, but the fact that you can't skip these and the way they kind of grind gameplay to a screeching halt, yeah, I would have preferred perhaps something a little bit different. A terminal, you know, a UNSC comm unit. I get the narratively, it's the grave mine, this, that and the other, but I'm sure many of you agree. In either case, we finally board the elevator, drop down, there's a huge explosion and fire from above, the elevator evidently just free falls and lands at the bottom, and that's the end of Crow's Nest. I now hand you back over to Reclaimer Gaming. Take it away, bud.
After surviving one of everyone's biggest elevator fears, the Chief manages to survive and shrug off the fall after already dropping from the sky like a Chinese spy balloon and walking it off. We find ourselves with the surviving evacuee Marines at the ground level of the facility. The cavern is dark and filled with only fires to illuminate the area. Taking a look around, it's revealed that this emergency escape tunnel still has some functioning warthogs found through a doorway. The Marines find the emergency lighting and showcase to us two warthogs. One a standard chain gun version and the other a troop carrier style. Even though it's more obvious which one would be more effective for the foreseeable combat ahead, I'd always find myself picking the troop carrier just because it was a new model to the game. But because I'm not 10 years old anymore, we picked the smarter option this time. A suicidal Nolan North Marine decides to walk in front of a moving vehicle,
Right on time!
and we finally get the wheels rolling and move through the giant metal door. It uncovers a totally natural K formation ahead of us, and we drive through, immediately pulling a Richard Hammond and nearly killing my passengers. A Marine comments on my impeccable driving skills,
What the hell do you call that?
and we proceed. It's already noticeable that between Halo 2 and 3, the Warthog seems slightly faster, but the physics and design of the vehicle look and feel the same. The only real difference is the updated model in terms of graphics. The thing that always annoyed me about these futuristic Humvees is that they always sounded kind of dull. I rarely seem to credit 343, but they seem to do it right in both sound design and physics. Anyway, as we exit the cave, we are met with Halo 3's first vehicle sandbox, and this level would only be a taster for much bigger levels yet to come. We drive past a bunch of big ring-styled structures buried in the ground that would be revealed to us later in Halo 3 ODST as the space elevator fragments seen from the slip space rupture inside of New Mombasa. Confusing at the time, but later turning into a nice little detail that can be appreciated later. A Marine radios in whilst we drive, telling us that we can't find the commander at the moment, so we should keep trying to escape and kill any Covenant that gets in our way. Another Marty O'Donnell score kicks in, and we are left to our own devices to just progress through the landscape at our own pace.
Gonna be looking for survivors.
I'm immediately blinded by a brute's flare, take my revenge on sniper jackals, and watch a warthog being torn to shreds by the newly discovered brute chopper on my travels. I was never a fan when it actually came to using the thing, but always appreciated what it added to the vehicle sandbox, especially in multiplayer. Being able to destroy other vehicles by ramming it was a new feature at the time, and was never reintroduced again until Halo Infinite, with 343's reintroduction to the vehicle. I clear the area and get swarmed by drones, which I ask my gunner politely if he would kindly ruin them for me. He does, and Sergeant Stacker asks me over the comms to destroy the barrier at the tunnel's entrance. I can't drive through it, which means I can't have Murder Man on the back shred it with the chain gun, so I jump out and move through, expecting to be greeted by camo brutes or hunters. Thankfully, there were no other surprises, and I blast the barrier generator and give some feedback on the Prophet's speech. Driving through the tunnel, a cute little reference to Halo 2 is shown on the signs above the torn up highway, New Mombasa, which I appreciate greatly since Halo 2 is my favourite Halo game. It also slightly foreshadows our next location, Voi, the next mission to come. A Covenant cruiser pulls a flyby, and over the radio we can hear a Marine explaining that the area the Covenant ships have been glassing is actually for excavation, and that they found something in the crater, which I thought was already obvious considering a space pyramid in the middle of the place along with a hurricane overhead. But I guess news travels slowly after a command centre collapses. Anyway, the path ahead is blocked and we're forced to jump out of our vehicle to the next location. Although I just want to point out that forced is a strong word, because after enough trying, it is possible to get a vehicle of choice over the gap. It just requires a lot of time and patience, which I just don't have. The commander assumes that what the Covenant has found is potentially the Ark, a Forerunner structure previously mentioned in Halo 2 as a remote activation site for all remaining Halos in the galaxy. This is immediately clear to us that it truly could be the end of the world if we don't stop them. And it's portrayed perfectly by the atmosphere, especially in the next few levels we see with its dynamic weather. Johnson tells us to push up towards the town of Voi, and our next destination is revealed. The next area has us saving a bunch of Marines from Covenant forces and then setting up defences around the claimed structure with another type of equipment, the trip mine. A firefight fiasco proceeds and we blast anything that comes near our little house at the top of the hill. At its conclusion, a Wraith decides to arrive and push my Marine shitting, leaving it up to me to return a favour. It's taken care of and I'm presented with a shiny new Warthog with another gun-ho Marine in the back, and one of the best scores out of the entire soundtrack. The 4 choppers ahead of me become easy prey thanks to my adrenaline-fueled driving and listening to Marty's sick beats. After that, even more show up asking for some lead medicine. With the help of my assistant on the chain gun, we comply. I then abandon him and take a Wraith for a test drive. The Wraith controls and feels just like the previous game, making it no issue to melt some brutes in my way. Although I have to admit, at the time I was slightly disappointed that we still couldn't control the cool little plasma turrets attached to the front. I always thought they'd eventually become a secondary attack like the Scorpion's machine gun from Halo 2, but instead they swapped them out for the passenger grunt on the front, making them really annoying if you decide to hijack one without killing the gunner first. I don't know if anyone else was hoping for this back then, but it was a bit gutting at the time for me. Ditching the alien artillery, I continue on foot to the final sector of the level. Another small but open area with plenty of angles and opportunities to take in killing the mass amount of brutes that hold the tunnel's entrance. Being on normal difficulty, I choose the hard and fast method, not my girlfriend's favourite, but it certainly gets the job done. Barely surviving, I disable the last barrier and trigger the level's end. Chief is delivered yet another warthog, making you wonder just how many the UNSC are going to keep giving him until they realise how much military budget they're wasting. The Lord Admiral gives a speech that one final effort remains. Again, really implying the finality of the battle, and the game on a deeper level. It's stuff like this that you don't really realise until you do an analysis of the game. Just another nice touch that adds to the sense and atmosphere of this is the end. Bungie were always so good at finding a way to embellish emotion and atmosphere into their games, and I think it's something that 343 tends to fail at.
Miranda. Anyway, I love those driving strings as we arrive in this particular level. That rhythm and intensity of the music, yeah, it really sets the scene for being a little bit more tactical and getting out there into the world and kicking Covenant ass. Yes, good music. In any case, immediately upon starting the level, I'm not sure many people are aware of this, but if you actually go over here and go behind one of these barricades, you can find yourself a happy little BR straight away at the start of the level, you know. It's useful to know. Also, you may or may not notice, but most of the areas that you go to in this level are effectively lakeside, port, kind of quayside locations, which means there was a huge body of water here before the Covenant started uncovering the Ark portal and thus evaporating off the lake, so we'll touch base on that as we progress through the level. It's worth noting that the Ark portal is actually nested directly between Mombasa and Voi, and even today, if you look at the landscape between Mombasa and Voi, there's very clear evidence of flood patterns and heavy water movement, which suggests that this area of the world goes through periodic wet and dry spells, and it just so happens that at the moment it's in a bit of a dry spell, so that doesn't rule out the possibility that in 500 years there's not going to be a very large body of water right between Voi and Mombasa. I bet you weren't expecting a geography lesson today. After moving through the first loading area of the Traxxas building, we come across our first Covenant of this level, which are holding the position above the main gate. Taking those out, you can then open the gate and allow access to the Marines downstairs, or ignore it completely and leave them behind. It's really completely up to you. Oh, and apparently these grunts know how to do parkour. Wait.
So there's this.
Couldn't help myself. So anyway, moving on, you can prime the button and open the door here, but there is actually a little sort of side alleyway that you can go to the right, which bypasses the door completely, and then we're dealing with our next staged horde of the Covenant. A couple of well-placed grenades though, and you should be able to blast your way through without a major problem. These tight corridors are... I'm blind! One of my least favourite pieces of equipment in Halo 3, especially because the brutes seem to spam them like it's going out of fashion. Nevertheless, after this tight kind of engagement, you get the opportunity to hop in a Ghost and move through into a much larger, more open area. You can do it without the Ghost, but I strongly recommend picking up the Ghost because the second the doors open, as long as you keep to the left rather than going down the ramp on the right there, you can just turbo boost and completely railroad all three of these. Very nice. You can somewhat view this first area as something of almost a training mission, so to speak, of what's to come later on in this same level. So this first mission, you're supposed to reinforce the Marines, and then you're supposed to get down there and take out the AA Wraith, which seems to be sowing the seeds on how to deal with AA Wraiths. Well, I don't know what he was doing in the corner there, but it sows the seeds to how to deal with AA Wraiths in the next couple of areas when there are more of them and it's a much larger, more pitched battle. Again, you can see on the right hand side of the footage here, this literally has a complete and utter drop-off, which again ties in with this edge of a lake or quay. You can kind of see it's got that kind of dock feel to it on the left hand side there. So again, being that this is a Traxxas business depot of sorts, or a logistics depot, perhaps this was a port that would then ship Traxxas containers across the lake or inland sea, or whatever the case may be, over to Mombasa. I have no idea why I threw that. I think, again, I'm in the Halo Infinite headspace, and I think that X is sprint, and it's obviously not. Then got this second Wraith guarding the main exit to this particular area that you need to take down, which I think is already being attacked and sieged? What? Attacked by the local Hornets, but once you've cleared that area, you can move into the next kind of logistical loading area of these Traxxas buildings. This one, however, is much more heavily populated with Covenant forces, with instead the Marines holding the gate in this one rather than the other way around, the Covenant holding the gate in the previous one. I also want to make a brief example that the Marine there said that they'll nail them with the 50. It's worth noting 50 is usually in relation to the caliber of the round that's fired, so 50 caliber rounds. Now you would expect that a 50 caliber round would be fired from a chain gun turret like that. However, the law states that those chain gun turrets actually fire 7.62 by 55. So why in the hell is it called a 50? I'm open to answers. Also, small point to note here, generally speaking, there's a higher ranked chieftain in this area, a war chieftain. You can't stick war chieftains with grenades, nor can you stick pack chieftains with grenades, so I don't know exactly what I was thinking there, but just don't do a 0-0 and try to grenade stick a chieftain. It doesn't work. This area is another example of an intermediary area, where rather than just allowing you to walk a big long corridor from one space to another space, they put small encounters of enemies in between those spaces to kind of keep you progressing through the level and not just be large kind of transient areas where not a lot's happening. In any case, a couple of well-placed rockets and some battle rifle fire should get rid of these drones relatively quickly. Again, try to do significantly better than I have here. Again, now the area is clear, you can kind of top up on ammo and move through to the introduction of the Mongoose for the first time in Halo 3. Ah yes, one of these. Again, this defied gods and demons. This is part of the same things that Cortana was saying during the Halo 3 trailer. I really wish they would have perhaps reworked the end of this level. You take down the AA turret, but then kind of walk a little distance through the savannah to the same location that we see in the trailer, and then all of this dialogue that periodically interrupts gameplay can just become, you know, almost played out exactly like it is in the trailer, where it happens quite rapidly in quite quick succession, very close to the very end of the level. That, in my eyes, would have made significantly more sense. Irrespective of that, we find our previous quote-unquote training area for the AA Wraith benefiting and coming to fruition in this particular area, where we have 2 AA Wraiths that need to be taken down, along with a smattering of ghosts, phantoms if you can land enough rockets on them at any given time, and you've also got a few Banshees that will strafe run you from time to time as well. I strongly recommend don't bother getting on the back of the Mongoose and trying to fire the rockets, because when it boils down to it, although you know, you might land the occasional lucky hit with a rocket, these don't track like the ones do back in Halo 2, which I've got to admit initially put me out a little bit when I first played Halo 3. So it's better in general just to leave the Marines on the back to fire the rockets, because although occasionally they'll shoot the ground and mess you up, case in point, they will also equally as likely score a miracle hit from halfway across the map that just seems to almost intersect with the course of another vehicle. Oh, also, little Easter egg, the back of this boat looks a little bit like a chief helmet. Anyway, once this area is majoritively clear of enemies, you then get the opportunity to stage your talents and skills that you've learned thus far against the single biggest vehicle that you can fight during the campaign. Yep, we finally have the reintroduction of the Scarab. Although it's worth noting that this Scarab is significantly smaller than the Scarab from Halo 2. The one from Halo 2 was absolutely massive and had extraordinarily long legs. The one in Halo 3, a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to board as long as you've got the height leverage. You can use the rocket pods that I just attempted to mount there, but make sure that one of the pallets don't fall on it, because you will just blow yourself to almighty hell. Or, alternatively, you can hit this button over here, come up the crane, and this gives you the height advantage that you need to better board the Scarab from above, assuming you don't absolutely botch the jump, which I'm pretty sure I did on many occasions. In any case, in this particular event I decided to forego the idea of trying to jump over to it and go back to the missile pods, making sure that the pallet wasn't in my way to start with. Yeah. So yeah, best course of action now is to literally just pepper this thing with missiles until you hear that characteristic whine of it overloading and collapsing to the floor, hopefully just low enough for you to jump into it. The reintroduction of the Scarab into Halo 3 as a much more dynamic enemy was a welcome change to the very passive Scarab of Halo 2. Basically the Scarab in Halo 2 just walked through the city, and then this is much easier said than done at higher difficulties because the Scarab is laser accurate with its Scarab gun and will fire on you pretty much any chance that it gets, so it is a case of fire, duck and cover. Once you hear that alarm though, and it's signifying that it's falling and you need to get over there to take it down finally, make your way over it as fast as possible. Unfortunately, I was a little bit unlucky in this particular takedown because it didn't drop down low enough for me to physically get into the back of the Scarab. But rest assured, there's still more than one way to take down a Scarab, and in this particular instance I decided to opt for taking the Ghost, firing at that small device at the back there which drops down a shield that covers the reactor of the Scarab, and then just shoot it until the reactor itself overloads and then just get clear. So luckily there's numerous ways you can take down the Scarab in Halo 3, which makes it a little bit more merciful, so to speak, on the player, barring small problems and errors in geometry or the way in which the Scarab collapses and this, that and the other. So it all works to our advantage. Finally, the pace slows down a little bit as we pass through an infirmary where there are numerous Marines that are injured and being tended to. Ah, yes, yes. Yeah, again, just it would have been so much better if they would have just wrapped that back into a trailer-like sequence that they could have at the very end of this level, but nevertheless, again, it serves a purpose. Once navigating through this little labyrinth corridor kind of thing in this logistical Traxxas building, we find ourselves in a warehouse with a load of brutes, and there is a significant population of civilians in this area as well, like factory workers who seemingly worked for Traxxas. Now they will periodically grab a handgun and take up arms and actually help you out if you save them quick enough, alongside the Marines that are also present in this warehouse. Try not to get yourself too bogged down by the large population of brutes. Application of the bubble shield really helps in being able to separate you from the gunfire, but being persistent, you'll make your way through no problem. This happens to be another opportunity to get in there quickly and kill the brutes before they kill the civilians. It's got to be some hell of a sight for the civilians to not only be being manhandled by huge brute alien monkey things, but then have a 7-foot tall armoured killing machine just breeze in, wipe the floor with everything, and then breeze out again. Anyway, after this you come into contact with the first set of hunters for this level, and I'm wiped completely out straight away. So let's just attempt this one more time and actually do it the right way this time, without getting completely wiped out. Putting a few grenades down there usually helps at wiping out at least one of them, and well, I was conveniently lucky there to get a complete wipeout with the second one. After clearing the hunters, you then encounter a large group of brutes, including a brute chieftain with a gravity hammer, whom you'll want to keep a relatively good distance from. This presents a particularly powerful adversary in this first location, to be tempered once again later on with the appearance of a golden war chieftain, but we'll get to that shortly. Keeping your distance and not closing too close to the brute chieftain is a wise decision, just until you take down the chieftain. That usually causes a lot of the subordinates to start panicking, and you can kind of go in and clear up there afterwards. This is an interesting courtyard area designed for this particular map that plays quite an important role in the characterization of the Flood in the following level. But in the meantime, we still need to clear this area out and take down the anti-aircraft gun. So again, some well-placed grenades and gunfire will usually allow you to progress relatively seamlessly through this particular area. punching a brute in the face always helps. We then get one of those small but important quiet moments within the campaign. This is something that's decidedly lacking in some of the more recent Halo games, but these small areas where not a lot happens that allows you just to take stock and gather your thoughts once again before the next encounter are strikingly important to the dynamicism of the way in which the game plays out. The turret here provides an interesting opportunity to lay down gunfire for the grunts that are milling around the area, but also be able to detach it and take it with you for use against the forces that are inevitably holding position directly underneath the anti-aircraft gun. It's also nice in that in the end part of that quiet moment that we've just come through, we see the anti-aircraft gun fire and take down a longsword, which likely careens down into the crater that the Covenant ships have excavated in order to exhume the Ark portal that we can see off to the right there. Technically speaking, this part of the level and this particular part of the campaign should line up with the original trailer that Halo 3 debuted with back in the day, the one where Chief is walking through the African savannah and then comes across the Ark portal. I take advantage of this little overhang on the far right side of the plateau that the anti-aircraft gun is on to flank the enemy and attack them from the sides. I'm still of the opinion that it would have been quite nice to have sort of a pitched battle, maybe directly underneath this anti-aircraft gun and take it down, but then actually have somewhat of a long walk to actually go through somewhat similar settings to the original Halo 3 trailer to then have the Ark portal revealed to us in a more cinematic manner. But in either way, this still does the job, and I suppose a long walk could be considered as being relatively boring and an unnecessary expenditure of time where the player is just running. In either case, once taking down the power node for the anti-aircraft gun, it explodes, and then we finally get the very end moment, so to speak, of the original Halo 3 trailer, where it plays out and Chief finally looks upon the Ark portal. This level narratively is put in place to allow Chief to basically arrive in Voy and take back control from the Covenant, clearing out ground forces, and then set the stage for what happens next with the Ark portal. This pitched battle is really nice to see, and it begs the question, if ever there was a Halo 3 anniversary, with the increase of processing power with more recent consoles, could we see a much more powerful mounted attack on the Ark portal and the Anodyne Spirit from UNSC forces? Because from my count, there are 3 frigates here versus what looks to be half a Covenant armada. It's little long odds. And finally, with the portal effect exploding,
this is the way the world ends.
We get a line Cortana quotes directly from T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Men. I absolutely guarantee you that that's Chip's Dubbo. And then we get the portal reveal. Seeing the UNSC frigates seemingly falling from the sky despite the fact that their anti-gravity traction drives allow them to operate in atmosphere without falling out of the sky is a little bit at odds with the fact that the Covenant ships in the background seem to have no problem with the effect from the portal whatsoever. And it's in these final moments of this level that we get the final plot twist. The Flood have made it to Earth. And that's where I hand back over to Reclaimer Gaming. You got this, bud?
It may look like the end of the video right now, but we've actually split this up into 2 parts. The second of which you can find over at Installation 00's channel, which I'll leave a link in the description for you. Before you leave though, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this, and leave any comments about what you think and what other games you'd like to see analysed. Alright, I'll see you in part 2. Peace.